Alright, I was feeling a little ambitious while we took our little break there. I made a square. I drew a line across the diagonals. I found the midpoint and drew a line straight up. And look at this fancy piece of geometry I just created here, right? Made a four-sided pyramid. Nice. So, we know that wireframe models have a lot of disadvantages. We're going to talk about the next phase or the next step in 3D modeling. And it still involves wireframes, but what we do is we try to give them the appearance of having some solid volume. So the way we do that is we start with a wireframe model and we type in 3D face. And 3D face is a command from the keyboard. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the 1, 2, 3, and 4 corners that make up that front face on my cube. Now, it doesn't really look any different, does it? And if it doesn't, it's because AutoCAD, by default, displays everything in wireframe. And if you want to change that, we could go in there and set it to one of these other visual styles. So I'm going to change it from wireframe display to conceptual display. And do you see what just happened? We had made a face, and that face is now stretched in between the edges of the wireframe. I'm going to do the same thing here, 3D face, and I'm going to click on the corner here, and the corner here, and the corner here, and the corner here, and now I got another 3D face. And now my wireframe is not going to be so hard to interpret, right? 3D face from here to here, to here, to here, looks good. We can go around to the bottom, click the faces on the bottom, boom, 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 boom. And then AutoCAD is just automatically stitching together this 3D face. And you can think of it, it's like a little thin, super thin sheet of material stretched between the frame, kind of like a kite, you know? And then bam, 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 and there's our cube. Now our cube, there's no question about which face is closest to us and which is farthest. We can see it. It looks solid now. We can't see the back edges any longer. So, on an object that has planar faces like this, the 3D face command can take a wireframe and turn it into something that looks a little less hard to interpret. Okay, and it's going to work on my pyramid too. And if you're asking how would you do that on a cylinder, well, instead of drawing 4 lines around the edge of the cylinder, you draw 50 or 100, and you'd have to make 3D faces all the way around for each of those little rectangular faces that made up the outside edge of your cylinder. Sounds like a lot of fun, right? Yeah, it's not. Okay, click, click, click. There we go. And then on the bottom right, we want it to have the appearance of being solid. I'll do the same thing here. We'll throw 3D faces along the bottom edge too. All right. So what have we done? We've taken a wireframe model and we have covered it with a thin tarp, if you want to think about it like that, right? Or a kite fabric. And we're stretching the 3D face from edge to edge. Now, just because I changed it to conceptual doesn't mean we can't look at it in wireframe. You can always put it back into a wireframe appearance if that makes you happy. I don't know why it would, but you could, right? Typically, if we're working in 3D with 3D solids, we're going to probably want to work with one of these visual styles. And we'll talk about them more a little bit later on, okay? So conceptual works for now. Now, the surface model definitely has some advantages, okay? It's not so ambiguous, right? We do know which face is closest to us. It's not so confusing, right? We can't see through things anymore. Most video games that you play, if they have 3D environments and 3D characters, the majority of these games are using surface models, which are what these are. They are infinitely thin fabrics stretched over frameworks. Okay, and that's how they make the buildings and the people and the animals and the weapons and everything else in modern video games typically. Okay, so There's some disadvantages, though, to working with the surface model. For example, if this was a real block of wood, and I took a piece of sandpaper and hit this edge with that sandpaper, or I took a file and I hit that edge, what would happen at that edge? Well, if it was a real block of wood, it would create a bevel, right? It would create a chamfer there. Well, that doesn't really happen with surface models. In fact, if you want to think about it like this, these are like soap bubbles. As soon as you try to do something like that, as soon as you try to round a corner off, or put a chamfer on, or drill a hole, look what happens. See, we just popped the bubble, right? That face is now gone. So surface models are not quite as easy to work with when it comes to modifying the model that you created with the surfaces. So that's the disadvantage to working with surface models. They're not easily changed with some of the modify commands like fillet and chamfer, and you really can't pop a hole through this that easy. Okay, so that's going to lead us to our next kind of model, and we're going to talk about solid models.